In only 3 films, as both writer and director, S. Craig Zahler has established himself as a filmmaker with a litany of idiosyncrasies. His mannered dialogue and slow pacing, his process of taking a genre and focusing only on its most essential elements. But perhaps most unusually for modern times, his dedication to increasingly flawed protagonists. These are the things that make his films great, or at the very least refreshing and uncompromising. Each of these 3 films have taken the form of a journey into violence, a trial in which already violent men are tested to their absolute limits. This structure is readily apparent and understood by both the characters and the audience in Zahler's first 2 films, Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99. In the first, a posse of men dedicate themselves to a rescue mission they know from the outset is most likely doomed.
How many of them do you think there are?
It won't matter. You have no chance against any number of them.
I'm riding out with Mr. O'Dwyer.
In the second, Bradley Thomas is literally imprisoned in a fight he must endure for as long as possible before his inevitable death.
Just what do you think you're going to accomplish here?
I'm waiting for a phone call. 1 minute after I'm off, I will turn myself over to you.
These tried and true genre premises, placed undisguised at the audience's feet, are enough narrative for Zahler to hang a film off, a structure that allows him to slowly immerse an audience into a journey, even including the often mundane physical processes of these hellish trials. But this structure is also used to carefully characterise these violent men, to unfurl their worldviews, their motivations and desires, the things that keep them going despite the odds. The precision and even simplicity of his first 2 films give them both a satisfying kind of allegorical neatness. Even if their themes are broadly drawn, they are both asking an unavoidably captivating question: what makes us carry on, and how far can someone go? However, when Zahler's third film, Dragged Across Concrete, arrived, it marked a deceptively significant break from these established qualities. On the surface, the film seems to follow the same pattern and structure of the first 2, a descent into violence by hardened men on behalf of their families.
Thank you.
But the goals and the personal animating worldview of these men are now reactionary, contradictory and even hate-filled to the point that it taints their familial relationships, the crucial redeeming element that Zahler seemingly intends to leave them with. By that, I mean that in Dragged Across Concrete, Ridgmond and Lorenzetti initiate their personal journeys into violence. Their trial is not forced upon them in literal terms, it is supposedly forced onto them through responsibility, and subsequently they act with an excruciatingly argued and delineated thought process to justify this.
And I go home and I find my daughter's been assaulted for the 5th time in 2 years. Because of the shit neighborhood my shit wages forced me to live in.
But these arguments are entirely specious. It seems more than a bit ridiculous to take it as fact that Ridgmond is forced to live in a specific inner city apartment with his family. We are given no reasons why he has to, apart from the vague notion that I guess he works in the city and the nicer neighbourhoods are too expensive. I mean, can't he get a different job, transfer to a smaller town, or just commute? Even if we take this premise on its own terms, brushing it aside as an inelegant narrative contrivance, Ridgmond is still a proponent of this circle of violence his family is suffering from, both on an interpersonal level and as part of structural, organised state violence. He believes in violence as not just an effective tool, but also an apt punishment if it so happens to occur.
You said if I told you where the bag was, you'd let me go.
Can you understand her?
No.
Zahler obfuscates this fact by invoking cliché dog-eat-dog, law of the jungle, natural order of things themes. It's a cruel world to Zahler, but that's Mother Nature, human nature.
Let's hunt some lions.
Well, in reality, Ridgmond is one of the many escalators of the systemic organised violence in society. Through the war on drugs, police brutality, he's an enforcer on behalf of the state, not exactly a free-thinking liberty lover, or, unlike his daughter, an innocent victim of declining social conditions. However, I don't think it's fair to say that Ridgmond's ludicrous motivation is a contrivance or an oversight. In fact, I think Zahler, despite his protestations, has created quite a conceptual film with Dragged Across Concrete. To this end, characters talk exclusively in broad, all-encompassing declarations about society and culture. The location of Bulwark is both fictional and self-consciously generic because Zahler believes it could be, and therefore is, anywhere in America. The film is constructing a view of the whole of society, is encapsulated by this fictional city. Richmond can't move his family because this city is America, and so Zahler populates it with a range of viewpoints. There are the police, far from angels but a necessary evil to keep things in check, to balance violence with violence. However, they are now hamstrung by wealthy liberals and undermined by a popular cultural shift emphasising empathy. These deluded and weak liberals therefore have allowed psychopathic criminals to become increasingly emboldened and unopposed. Equally, as social conditions further worsen, the parallel class of sort of salt-of-the-earth criminals continue to be created. The world is a jungle, and liberal delusion can't change that.
Welcome back, and congratulations on bringing such a lovely boy child into this world.
One of the supposed victims of this cultural shift one way, and a declining middle class the other, is Lorenzetti himself. His economic and social hang-ups, which seem almost comically facile to the well-adjusted, drive him to his death. Lorenzetti's supposed motivation, just as specious as Richmond's, is that his girlfriend makes more money than him, that he won't be able to provide a rich lifestyle for her. This explanation of their relationship and his own desperation is really actually quite bizarre to the audience, seeing as we never see any evidence to this effect. We are only told this directly by Lorenzetti, who seems to believe what he is saying, although it's certainly hard to trust his judgment, especially seeing as she is characterised as a kind of refined and successful professional. Perhaps this is also a veiled cultural dig at liberal cultural elitism. Either way, I don't believe it's the film's intention that Lorenzetti is prepared to risk both killing and dying because of this insecurity, but it's actually hard to see it any other way. Coming back to Richmond's self-justifications, and it's a very similar story. I don't think we are supposed to see his situation as easily solvable, or as a reflection of his own inadequacies to adapt his life in even the most minor of ways to suit his family's evolved needs. Although again, it's hard for me to read it any other way. Often Richmond's repeated insistence of his noble justifications just make his actions at the end more obviously, even hilariously ridiculous.
My daughter got assaulted for the 5th time 2 days ago. My wife has multiple sclerosis and can't even walk half the time without a cane. I need this.
What we are left with is a rather strange beast then. What the film presents to me, clearer so on rewatching, is a kind of self-victimizing suicide letter. The cultural grievances and economic anxieties of Richmond and Lorenzetti radicalize them into blinkered, single-minded men of violence. They are obsessed with the notion that the city, as a stand-in for all of the US, is a battleground, figuratively but also literally, that they are in a doomed last stand, perhaps referenced by the city's very name, Bulwark. For Richmond to even just commute from a suburb to his job of daily brutalising the inner city's poor residents, it would constitute a personal retreat, a moral compromise.
There's a lot of imbeciles out there.
For Lorenzetti to accept that his potential fiancée is the breadwinner of the relationship would be a similarly unconscionable and noble betrayal of himself. His proposal is actually a suicide note.
I gotta know. In case we don't come back, I gotta know what she would have said.
Either death or a solution necessitating extreme violence is preferable to these men. The kind of random asides are therefore not provocateur-style empty outrage baiting then. They are weirdly the missing link in these men's psychology, the kind of bizarrely inane concepts that we see so commonly leading to right-wing political agitation and even radicalization.
It's a guy or a girl singing his song. Not that there's much of a difference these days.
I think that line was obliterated the day men started saying, we're pregnant, and their wives were.
This is all pretty ridiculous and inadvertently darkly funny. However, it's also hard to deny that the movie has a genuinely unsettling conviction in its characterization of a society in decline. This conviction is most deeply represented and expressed through Henry, a character that is supposed to represent both the other side of the coin, but also how criminals and police are lowered to the same level if cops are forsaken by civilians. Henry's motivating situation is certainly a lot more believable than the others, even if it's presented in scenes cartoonishly on the nose and awkward, even by Zahler's standards. What Henry represents by the end of the film is a person that understands deeply the way the world works, and so is able to play all sides against each other. Unlike the cops, he has no self-delusions about his own character and situation. He understands that society is a jungle with a thin veneer of civility that is wearing away every day. Zahler's world is ultimately totally nihilistic. The way to come out on top is not just to accept, but to expect the inherent animalistic brutality of each and every person. Henry is the only character with a real arc, and by the end he embodies this outlook. This is very literally how he survives, and both Lorenzetti and Richmond die.
You fucking dumbass. I wasn't gonna blackmail you, my word's good. All I ever did for this was steal some autos, peddle some blow, and put the fool who crippled my brother into intensive.
His role in the film of course brings in troubling racial politics, a commentary on a seemingly insurmountable societal divide that is often demarcated on racial lines. It's hard not to think about the Second Civil War fantasies that seem endemic to American conservatism and are at least implicitly, if not explicitly, imagined as race wars. However, these fantasies are usually secretly relished. Zahler's genuine conviction, concern, and empathy is unmistakable, making his doomed view all the more troubling. Instead, this kind of conservative worldview separates people to the extent that Henry buries the dead cops and holds a not even that begrudging respect for them, respect as equals rather than as oppressors in often class warfare and police brutality.
After all this is finished, forgotten, I'll come back and bury you right.
Again, I'm certainly not arguing that all of this is Zahler's exact premeditated intention. I think he would probably say something along the lines of my response shows how all-consuming and distrustful the political divide has become. And the thing is, he would naturally be right. But at the end of the day, it's just a shame that the movie isn't very good, that this conceptual approach muddles and hollows the characters, especially Henry, that entire sections of this very long film are capsized with cringeworthy smug boomer crap and painstakingly laboured tough guy humour, that by the end, when things are finally getting into gear, I just want to be put out of my misery. Despite all this, it's startling when out of nowhere the clouds part and we are presented with a new dramatic microcosm, new faces, a performance that transcends the overwriting and melodrama to be genuinely touching, an emotive character-based premise to engage with, right out of Zahler's usual playbook. Naturally, it is accepted from the start as accompanied by a shroud of inevitable doom hanging all around, and when we are orphaned again it is with a sense of even greater narrative and existential pointlessness.